Breaking the wall of common sense. This is Baja Sensor Studio. The war in Ukraine seems to be gradually escalating. A shocking report suggests Laos and Southeast Asia may send troops to aid Russia in the Ukraine war, which is a very concerning development. Today, let's take a closer look at this issue. Let's get right into it. Already in the war in Ukraine, not only Russia, but also North Korea has sent a large number of troops, and the scale of the conflict is gradually increasing. But now, there are reports that Laos might also send troops to Russia. North Korea News, a United States media outlet focused on North Korea, reported that Russia seems to be attempting to involve Laos in the ongoing war. Currently, the Russian government has announced that it is pushing forward with a plan to deploy the Lao People's Army Engineering Unit to the Kursk region so they can carry out demining operations. Since this info comes from Ukrainian intelligence, it should be taken with skepticism. However, given Laos' existing medical support to Russia, discussions likely occurred. The Kursk region is the first Russian territory that was attacked by Ukrainian ground forces. Laos may send an engineering unit of up to 50 engineers here, according to reports of a tentative agreement between the governments of Laos and Russia. Of course, since this force consists of only 50 people, it doesn't seem likely to be a factor that will significantly change the course of the war. Reports suggest Russia intends to deploy a Laotian engineering unit for mine clearance in the Kursk region. Ukrainian intelligence revealed this information, claiming it's a military intervention disguised as a humanitarian project. Russia is deploying foreign troops into its territory, claiming humanitarian reasons, but it's effectively participating in the war, officials stated. But there's a crucial point we need to pay attention to here. Laos was already involved in the Ukraine war to some extent. They were providing free rehabilitation medical services to wounded Russian soldiers. This isn't just simple medical support, it's providing Russia with a strategic resource that helps restore the human assets needed to continue the war. In other words, while Laos appears neutral on the surface, it has already provided Russia with practical wartime infrastructure. It's important to note that medical support and military deployment are entirely distinct issues. Medical aid can be diplomatically ambiguous, but deploying troops is an unambiguous act of military intervention and a political statement. Once this military deployment happens, the world will view Laos as a pro-Russian war nation, leading to significant repercussions for the country. The logic of expanding the war will be strengthened. The deployment of Laotian troops to Russia signifies that from the Western perspective, Russia has gained another war ally. Consequently, United States and NATO support for Ukraine will inevitably intensify, likely accelerating Western information warfare, cyber warfare, and military equipment support. Since President Trump frequently changes his policies on a whim, we'll have to wait and see what happens. At the very least, European countries will see this as a crisis and will try to provide more support. Currently, Hungary and Poland are offering assistance despite the unfamiliar circumstances. And if Laos officially sends troops, countries with similar political systems and economic structures, such as Cambodia and Bangladesh, may also be likely to cooperate with Russia. This will serve as a strong signal that President Putin is forming a kind of alliance, and it will further accelerate the movement toward bloc formation between the Western camp and the new authoritarian camp. Although only 50 troops are being deployed, the diplomatic ramifications will be significant. Less than a year after North Korea dispatched troops, another country plans to send troops, causing repercussions greater than imagined. At this point, there's one fact we absolutely need to point out. Russia is by no means satisfied with just Laos sending troops. Russia is currently creating a massive state-controlled international volunteer force system on an unimaginable scale. Last June, Sergei Shoigu, the Secretary of Russia's National Security Council, made a surprise visit to Pyongyang. The official announcement after meeting Chairman Kim Jong-un was shocking. North Korea will send 6,000 more engineering and military construction personnel to Russia's Kursk region. The North Korean military is preparing to deploy an additional 30,000 troops in the near future. North Korean forces are becoming so crucial that they could be a key pillar on the front lines in Ukraine's war. And not only from North Korea or Laos, but Russia is currently gathering troops and workers from at least 21 countries around the world. Volunteers from Uzbekistan, India, Syria, Cuba, and other countries are being recruited, with some deployed to the front lines. This process resembles how the Soviet Union allied with communist countries globally during the Cold War. It suggests the gradual rise of authoritarian influence. Moreover, President Putin's strategy is not only about increasing troop numbers, but also about spreading the war's legitimacy, which is truly frightening. What does it mean that volunteer soldiers from dozens of countries are supporting Russia? It may appear as a multilateral conflict, not just between Russia and Ukraine. This could break down the economic sanctions and isolation imposed on Russia by the international community and further escalate the war in Ukraine. North Korea is already providing significant military supplies to Russia. So far, North Korea has supplied Russia with countless artillery shells, reportedly around 12 million rounds of 152mm shells. That's not 1,200, but 12 million rounds. South Korean Defense Intelligence Agency data shows North Korea recently sent around 20,800 containers of artillery shells and supplies to Russia. The containers held an assortment of artillery shells, weapons, and military supplies. North Korea has been supplying weapons to Russia, and Ukraine is closely monitoring the situation. Weapons and military supplies are being produced around the clock in North Korea, and recently it was stated that about 40% of the ammunition used by Russian forces in the Ukraine war is made in North Korea. Moreover, North Korea is sending ballistic missiles and other weapons to Russia, raising serious concerns about their close ties. Russia is escalating the war in a desperate attempt to compensate for the heavy losses suffered by its military. President Putin's pursuit of victory in war extends beyond traditional means of guns, swords, and shells. President Putin utilizes a complex combination of military operations, diplomatic strategies, information warfare, and political and psychological warfare. This war currently seems more focused on exploiting weaknesses in international politics and public opinion than actual frontline combat. What President Putin is particularly paying attention to is the fatigue of the West. As the Ukraine war continues, the United States and Europe are facing growing economic, political, and psychological strains. He continues exploiting this. For instance, the extended Ukraine war has caused a simultaneous surge in refugees and inflation in Europe. Germany, France, Italy, Poland, and other countries are accommodating hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees, leading to social burdens, welfare system pressure, and political instability with rising far-right sentiment. In essence, President Putin is exploiting the internal fatigue and political conflicts of democratic countries to discourage their support for Ukraine. He continues to encourage various countries to support Russia, showing that time is on Russia's side. Ukraine cannot help but lose without support from the international community because Russia is just too powerful, but Russia is trying to break the link between Ukraine and the international community. From South Korea's viewpoint, the escalating war in Ukraine is really bad. As North Korea keeps sending troops to aid Russia, the Russia-North Korea relationship has significantly strengthened. On July 12th, Kim Jong-un and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov held talks. In this process, North Korea stated it shares views on all strategic issues at an alliance level, demonstrating the high strategic level between the two countries. North Korea is obtaining advanced weapons and tech from Russia in return for sending troops. Recently, there was news that North Korea installed Russia's Pantsir S-1 air defense system in Pyongyang. And they are also sending workers to Russian drone factories to acquire drone technology. If North Korea engages Laos in the Ukraine war, it will avoid diplomatic isolation and expand its international influence through their close relationship. This is a terrible situation for us. From our perspective, the Ukraine war must not expand further. The problem is, given the current situation, we have no idea when it will end. Russia is advancing little by little into Ukrainian territory, but the pace is very slow. The Russian military is suffering heavy casualties as both sides are locked in a back-and-forth battle. No one knows when the war will end, and the fighting could continue from here. It seems like the Russian military is on the offensive right now, but even that isn't going well. Laos's involvement may surpass military support, potentially disrupting international diplomacy. This could accelerate the formation of a new alliance centered around Russia and make the confrontation with opposing blocs even more pronounced. South Korea will also be directly impacted by these diplomatic shifts. If North Korea and Laos both draw closer to Russia at the same time, the security environment on the Korean peninsula is likely to become even more complicated. We must anticipate this trend and redesign our diplomatic and security strategies accordingly. What are your thoughts on the current situation in the Ukraine war? Share in the comments. Thanks for watching.